home in the next couple of days?
Got a chance to go up.
Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for March 25th, 2019. First off, to the open meeting law, is there anybody recording this meeting? Okay, nobody recording the meeting. May we all stand and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. And we have no public comments. Anybody come in late that wants to make any comments? Okay. So we'll have that for the record tonight. Thank you. And let's see. First, we have a public hearing, the update on the elementary school redevelopment projects, and I'll turn that over to you.
Through the chair, thank you. If the board would make a motion to move up item 6A, which is under the town manager items for the update on the elementary school projects. This is not a hearing, this is just an update to the board on the progress that we've made.
Okay.
Make a motion that we move up item 6A. Second.
Okay. Item 6A moved up. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you. So as you know, we signed a development agreement in September of 2017 following a very lengthy public process to put these two school properties out to bid. And at that time, we had selected Penrose properties, and we have been working with Penrose on both the Mary D. Stone School and the Julia Bancroft School. There's a lot of work that goes into both of these schools to get these projects ready for redevelopment, including all of the various funding components that need to go into each of these. So we just thought it would be prudent to bring the developer in to give you an update as to where we stand, and also to give ourselves an update on the internal process and what we've been doing. I can tell you, since we advertised, bid, and entered the development agreement, we internally work on this every day. To some extent, there is some portion of our day that is dedicated to this project. Both of these are major projects. So if we could just get started, I want to invite Charlie Adams, who's the Vice President of Penrose Development, and Shannon Regan. If you want to come up here, our Economic Development Coordinator.
While they're coming up, I'd just like to make a note that I have approached you several times, because I've received phone calls of people from the public wanting to know how the school projects are going, and we continue to tell them it's an ongoing project. Applications have been made through the state for permitting and for different rules and regulations they've got to go through. It's a step-by-step procedure. It's a long process, and when you mention the state, everything goes slow. So it's definitely a worthwhile venture that we've entered into, and it's a matter of time-consuming to get to that point. So I support it wholeheartedly, and we move forward on this.
No, thank you for your comments, and that's true. I think, and Charlie will point out, when this is a long process, it's no different than any other projects that go through the state. There are a number of different funding sources. It takes several years to get through the process, and we are getting there at the end. As you said, Mr. Holstrom, it's absolutely worth it. Both of these projects are so exciting. We need senior housing. We need senior affordable housing. It's going to be great for the community, but there is a process to get there. So I'm going to turn it over to Charlie.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, members of Selectmen and Town Manager. Thank you for having us here tonight. Your comments are right, spot on. It does take a tremendous amount of time, and from our perspective, we're actually right on schedule, so we are really excited. And as you'll see from these slides, since we've been selected and got through the. Can you hear? Okay.
Yep, sure. I was just going to say if Shannon wants to sit here.
Since you were selected, we've been, going at this full tilt to get it to where it needs to be, and we'll give you kind of an update of where we are now. So just sort of briefly give you kind of an overview of some of the major milestones. This doesn't cover all of the meetings. We kind of ran out of space on the slide, but we sort of stopped when we filled up the slide here to show you some of the different pieces we've been doing. Obviously, we once we were selected, we immediately started to engage the community in a design charrette process to make sure that the building represented the needs and desires of the town and was serving the elderly community. So we had a very successful design charrette that was sponsored by ourselves and Enterprise, which was an aging in place conference where we brought a number of professionals together from the senior community, health experts, design experts, as well as many town and building officials from the town as we could, local citizens, folks from the senior center, to put together a whole design charrette to govern how we wanted to see these projects unfold. So for that, we've had a number of meetings. We've continued to work on the plans. We went through the zoning process with the zoning folks, and quite honestly, it happened about in half the time that we thought it would. Normally, you can see here we got our zoning approval in December of 2017. That easily could have been March or April of 2018. But given how supportive the town was and the Board of Zoning Appeal, we were able to get through that process quite quickly. So once we do that, we start to get to work on the design. The applications for funding for the state resources are once a year, so you get one shot. So we put together, most of 2018, we put together the plans and went through Historic Commission review and various other things and committees to get the plans to a point where we could apply for the tax credits, which are the ultimate vehicle. So in around November and December of every year, this year it was November, the state put out an invitation to apply for credits, what they call a pre-application round, which is actually very thoughtful of them. You just do a short form. They determine whether your project is ready to proceed, and then if it is, then you sort of go full bore into putting together an entire tax credit application, which the folder I think we delivered to you, you saw it's a nice thick document. It kills a few trees. Luckily, it's all electronic. We only had to make one copy. We make it for the town. But that application went in February of this year. That's when it was due. DHCD has already had their site visit, and Shannon and Ed and some others for the town were there to participate in that design review with us. There were 4 or 5 members from the state that toured the building, had a lot of questions about our plans and specs and the overall concept of the budget. So we are now currently in the round, and we'll talk a little bit at the end about next steps on that, but we're in the round for tax credits. So just to kind of remind you, since it's been a while since I've been here, sort of the plans and specs. Let's see if I can look up. It's hard to see on here, so I may have to turn here. So, obviously this is the site plan. It's a little bit more developed than you saw before because we spent, a lot of time. We're up to 50% drawings now. And one of the things that the architects and the engineer have really worked hard on, and we focused on Mary D. Stone first, and we can get into a little bit about why that was, but we've been focusing more on Mary D. Stone and focused on that first. It's a tight site. It's a very tight site, as you know, so there's been a lot of kind of pushing and pulling to make sure we get the number of units in there that we need to get the building to be fit in with the historical context of the front portion. Just to remind folks, in case they forgot, we're going to retain the front portion. We're going to knock down the 2 back pieces and add units here. So in order to make all that stuff work, the architects have had to spend a tremendous amount of time sort of figuring it all out. In particular, they've spent a lot of time in this center section here. If you will. It's, when you see some of the other drawings, that's the connector between the old part and the new part. So they've had to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how all this works, especially from a historic standpoint, where to put the elevator, how to make sure that the elevator can serve the units on the old portion as well as the new portion. One of the things you'll see in the elevations, I should say, is just to remind you that the old portion is 2 stories, the addition is 4. So when you do the math, you got to figure out how the elevator works, right? So we have half stops for the elevator. So they had to design it in just the right way to make sure that obviously everything was fully accessible for residents on every floor. And one of the key things that we had planned for, we had submitted with the RFP, was part of our proposal to you, was a community room that's going to be accessible to the town as well as the residents of the community. So that's a fully accessible, handicap accessible room that would be available for meetings and things as an overflow from here. Particularly, I understand you don't have a lot of handicap accessible space and can certainly use more of it. So that'll be a resource that we'll make available. And they've designed that accordingly. Just to follow through, just to give you a little bit of the site plans, we do have, there's a lounge on every floor. There's laundry on the second and third floors. Again, it's a very tight building. We would like to have put laundry on every floor, but it just, the space didn't allow for that. But there is the laundry on the second and third floor, meaning that residents would only have to go down one floor through the elevator to deal with their laundry. Let me show you a little bit about the elevation. So this is the part where I was just talking about earlier, where you see it's 2 stories for the old portion, and then you see the connector in the middle, and then the new portion at the end. So the architects, again, have spent a lot of time trying to figure out how the old and the new relate to each other, and have that break in the middle with sort of having it be architecturally significant in the way that it sort of flows naturally, so that it's sort of 3 separate pieces, and it'll look in that way. Here's just a view how it orients to the town hall. So actually, I should say, just to go back here, so this is the sort of what we would call the front entrance. So the front of the building will remain basically as it is. We'll clean it up and fix it up and make it all look nice. But for historic reasons, we're not going to make any adjustments in terms of taking out stairs or anything like that. So that will not be an entrance to the building because it's not accessible. So the primary entrance to the building will be, right here in the connector part. And so that'll basically be the front door. So that'll be sort of the front door, and then this is kind of like the back side as you come around the building. You drive around the building and come out the side on the other side of the Mary D. Stone School. One of the things I thought we would share here is, we pulled some pictures from the historic the historic application that we put into the state to get it designated as historic. So you can see we took this picture of the building and then layered in what the back portion would look like. We thought that would be helpful for folks to see. The good news, bad news is you don't see the back part, so it blends in nicely. So that's good from the historic folks, and also good for the the neighborhood. It's not going to be a very large, imposing building. So this I thought was a nice representation where you could see the old part and the new part there in the background, and how it sort of blends in nicely, and you can't see it. Similarly, we took it from the other side and showed when this old part here is going to come down, obviously. And then, this will be added back in. We did the same thing from the back. Here's how the existing looks, and then we added in the back. So again, the architect spent a lot of time on this piece here because they had to make sure that it didn't overwhelm the front part of the building, and to try to get the scale of units that we need to make the economics work, which was around 56. So that was a real challenge for them, and I think DeMille Schaefer's done an excellent job. So that's Mary D. Stone. So Julia Bancroft will be coming after that. The state generally allows you to pursue one of 2 applications, and we started with the Mary D. Stone for a variety of reasons. One, because it's close to the town hall. We thought that would be important, given some of the community benefits and needs that you have here. And it's a nice, clean, good site to work off of. So the Julia Bancroft would be next. Once we get the credits for the Mary D. Stone, we'll continue to do the work on Julia Bancroft. And just to remind folks what that would look like. Again, this one we might be able to get up to 60 units. Obviously, it's a much larger site. You start to get over 60 units, it becomes a little bit economically infeasible because some of the resources that are available for the state. So that's sort of why we kept it at 60. You can see the breakdown is mostly 1 bedrooms. There's not a high demand for seniors to 2 bedrooms, but there will be some, so we want to make sure that those are available. And here we've put, and it's actually, I should have said that in the Mary D. Stone as well, about 80% of the units will be what we call affordable to folks below 60% of area median income, and there will be a market rate component. We put it here as workforce, but it's market rate. But and then some of the amenities that you can see here will be similar to what we have in Mary D. Stone, and actually here there's opportunities to do a few more amenities because we have more land. So community room, meeting room, laundry rooms. Here we'll be able to have laundry rooms on every floor, and obviously resident lounges. So just to, in terms of if you know, obviously you know the site. The top building here is up on the hill. So the first floor here is actually sort of 1 floor below the building up at the hill. So the second floor would be equal basically to the first floor of the Bancroft building. So that's where the buildings will connect. So they're going to connect from the second floor to the old building at the first floor. Then of course you would go up to the third floor, and there'll be actually 4 floors on it as well. There won't be any connection by the time you get up to the 4th floor on Julia Bancroft. In terms of, sort of what's next, future timeline, so we are waiting for the Part 2 approval of our historic tax credit application, which we expect in next month. And shortly after that, we put down here the Federal Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Award for Mary D. Stone in August. Obviously, nothing's guaranteed. We're extremely hopeful and optimistic that we'll be successful and be able to get an award. It could be earlier than that. We don't have any way of knowing when the state will actually make the awards. It's usually sometime in the summer. Could be as early as June, more likely July, and in some cases actually slips to August. If we are successful in getting the award for Mary D. Stone, then we'll immediately pursue Julia Bancroft, and we'll put in a pre-app for November with the expectation that we'd be invited into the following round. And then once we get the award for Mary D. Stone, while we're working on Julia Bancroft application, we'll obviously continue. We'll then be able to completely move forward onto closing. So then it'll be completely in our hands. Once we get the funding, it's completely in our hands and can move forward. We go and get an investor, and we go through a due diligence period with them, and that can take 4 to 6 months to go through it with the investor. But given the fact that the plans are fairly well advanced on Mary D. Stone, we should be in good shape and should be able to start construction no later than February of 2020, to be conservative. So that's the schedule for, and then Julia Bancroft will obviously follow that same pattern. So that's sort of in terms of an organized presentation what I have. I'm certainly available for any questions, comments that you have about the project as well.
And Mr. Chair, if I could recommend that if Charlie can come up and join us at the table if you have any questions, and Shannon can just go through a couple quick slides. I want you to see what the town administration has done on the project as well. Does that work?
That's great.
Okay.
That works for me. While we're getting set up here, we have our representative from the Worcester Telegram Gazette with us tonight, and he is recording and started prior just presentation. Thank you.
I can run through. So thank you for having me. I'm just going to provide a quick update on the town side of what we've been doing. Charlie went over most of it. But really, since Penrose Properties was selected as the developer, we've been, as Julie said, pretty much doing things every day on some capacity. So we attended and facilitated site visits with Penrose, their development team, and DHCD numerous times throughout the process. Julie and I have met with local, state, and federal officials regarding the 2 school development projects, the Board of Selectmen, Historical Commission, Council on Aging, and then our Senator, our Representative Paul Frost, Congressman McGovern, and the Lieutenant Governor, Karen Polito. We also advocated and expressed the need for affordable housing in town and collected letters of support for both the historical tax credits and the low-income housing tax credits. The Board of Selectmen submitted one, the Town Manager, Historical Commission, Senior Center, the Auburn Housing Authority, the police and fire chiefs, and then on a legislative level, Senator Michael Moore, Representative Paul Frost, and Congressman Jim McGovern also provided letters for both numerous times each funding round. And then we both attended, Penrose and I attended committee meetings regarding the projects. So Penrose had gone to the development coordinating group with their comprehensive 40B project submissions. The housing subcommittee, when the housing plan was being developed, they came, Board of Selectmen, Historical Commission, and Conservation Commission. So this is an overall timeline. For some reason it won't move. So I'll just go over it. There's a whole town administration progress to date. So it started with the housing plan that was done in September 2017, and then it started with the site visit with the contractors in the same month. As Charlie said, we had the design charrette at Town Hall in September 2017, and during that time the housing plan was also accepted by DHCD. And then following that, they had a presentation at meeting at the Senior Center to just meet them where they're at and have a community meeting there. And then the DCG meeting with their comprehensive 40B permits. And then we started drafting letters of support for the 40B applications. I attended the Conservation Commission to present the redevelopment projects. We worked on environmental questionnaires for Penrose and some supplemental documents. Continued to do site visits, and then then really in January 2018, it started the historic designation work. So since then, we've drafted letters of support, like I said, for Mass Historic Commission and the tax credits. We met a couple times with our local historic commission to keep them updated on the project and express the need for this housing in town. We sent the letters of support during multiple stages of the historic application. They came back and wanted more information, so we resubmitted letters at that point. And then Julie attended meetings with the Lieutenant Governor and Representative Paul Frost to keep them updated on the projects. And then starting in last summer, we continue to do the historic tax credits, the Part 2 application letters for the tax credits, and continue to meet with the officials local and state and federal level. We updated the development agreement and amendments in December of 2018. And then starting this year, we started with a walkthrough with Penrose again, and then started the low-income tax credits with DHCD. So we collected letters for that, and then submitted photos of Mary D. to Penrose for their architectural renderings, and submitted the letters that we received. And most recently in March, we did a walkthrough with Penrose and DHCD as well, due to their application that they're reviewing now. So the next steps on our part, very similar to Charlie's in many ways, but really it's just continue to keep the Board of Selectmen and the Historical Commission and other committees aware of the progress of the two projects. And then once the tax credits are awarded, they work on officially transferring over the school, Mary D. Stone to Penrose. And then once construction is completed, town administration would follow a very similar timeline with the Julia Bancroft School. So it would be very similar of the project. So I'm also available for questions, but that's pretty much an update so far.
Thank you, Shannon. First off, is any board members got any comments or anything? Mr. Berthew?
Just a quick question. So you said the Mary D. Stone, the original building, is 2 levels, and then the new part's going to be 4 levels. The Julia Bancroft, is that 3 levels on the original, or?
2, I believe it's also 2, if I'm not mistaken.
Because a couple of years ago, I went.
Oh, you know what?
there.
I apologize. It's 3. There's
Okay.
3. Because there's we can use the basement.
You can use it, okay.
Yeah.
I just want.
Mostly for mechanical. I was looking at these drawings. We have 1 unit down there now. I'm not sure we'll keep that though.
Okay.
But we'll use the bottom will be for mechanical.
So the second floor then of the lower level will go into the basement level or into the first level of the original school?
Yeah, so you're right. That's right. So the first floor of the new building would go into the basement, essentially. I'm sorry, the second floor of the new would go into the basement of the first floor, right? Yeah. Yep.
All right. And so you had said that, like, with the Mary D., you were showing, like, the original part, and then you happen to say, like, it'll get rebuilt. Now, I know obviously the facade is staying, the very front, but is the whole
The entire front part of the building.
The entire front portion, that 2 levels
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
staying? Okay.
Let me go. I can go back. Is there like a commercial we could go to for break or something and then come back?
Well, I'd like to hear from Mr. Berthew. He said something about he had gone there a few years ago.
A couple of years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
You've aged well.
Thank you.
I'm not an expert in PowerPoints, but let's see if we could do this here. Whoops, I want to right by, let's do the drawing. Picture, let's see. So this is probably the best picture. All right, so you see the front, obviously the front portion that's
Right.
short and wide. That entire piece will stay, that you see that has the slate roof, the pitched slate roof. Once you see the part in the back that's recessed, that's coming down.
Which is what we originally, I just wanted.
Correct. No changes from
I didn't know if
originally.
I misunderstood something
Right.
you said tonight.
You know, the historic value, really, if you will, is in the front piece. And the rest is just not usable to convert to residential. The front part is quite great to convert to residential. I mean, the units will be actually quite large. We're going to keep all the existing classrooms intact, which will actually make them larger than a typical unit you would do. If you're doing new construction, they'd be smaller. So those units will be pretty spectacular with some really big windows. And the architects are trying to keep, I don't know if you last time you've been in it, but they've kind of got like recessed closets with these, kind of these sort of bifold doors. Some are there, some aren't. The idea is if they, we'll have to take them off, because those will actually be where we'll probably put the kitchens, but we'll try to keep, they're going to keep the recessed closet, if you will. Anything that's of historic value that we take out, we'll put somewhere else in the building to keep it as a historic value.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, Mr. Carpenter.
Just for the timeline, you're progressing with Mary D. So JB, you get all your financing, you're fully involved in Mary D. Are you still now then going to begin the process on JB to try and get all the credits and?
Absolutely. So we have already started the process on Julia Bancroft. So the way we work, obviously, is that we invest resources. We're putting out a lot of money to do this, so we invest the resources up to a point. We took the drawings to where we needed to take them for Julia Bancroft. If we had been invited into the round, we would have progressed them further. So they were probably about 20%. We would have progressed them to 50%. We did that for Mary D. Stone, so we went from 20% to 50%. The drawings in the application are 50%. Once we get the green light that we're invited into the round, that's when those will progress.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else got anything else? Yes, Mr. Liberty.
I just want to make sure I heard you right before. So you said that when you submitted the application for JB, you can only submit one at a time. So we were looking at one year and one the
Correct.
next year. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Given how competitive the resources are, that's generally, we tried. We always ask, can we do two? And it was said to move forward with the one. So.
Anybody got anything else? Well, I'm amazed at what the buildings are going to look like afterwards, just by showing the overlays of what's going on. These buildings have been here since the 20s, and it'd be too bad to lose, the front portions of the buildings, and now we're getting a chance to utilize those buildings. But I guess I'll turn to the administration and just ask Julie. A lot of concerns are of these buildings now as they stand. Are they being maintained, and are they secure?
Through the chair, we do have a budget of approximately $46,000 for both buildings. That covers both buildings for anything that we need, minor repairs. Penrose has already invested $5,000 into the roof at Mary D. Stone. We're in the process of working with them. There are some additional leaks that we've discovered. We're working with Bill Coyle from DPW and Penrose, and we're trying to get some estimates on the least expensive approach that we can do to prevent any damage from the historic portions of the building while making sure the building is tight. So we'll know more on that in the next couple of weeks, yes. I assume. As far as security, yes, the buildings are checked on a regular basis. DPW, fire, police, we do check on it. The fact of the matter is, the longer a building is vacant, the more difficult it becomes to redevelop it. So that is why Penrose has been working really hard to try to push both projects through at the same time. Unfortunately, the state said we could only choose one for the community because it's so competitive. You can't have two projects in a given community in the same round.
And Mary D. Stone was sort of made more sense. It was farther along. It had, it was the right one to do. Yeah. So we looked at both buildings and thought, for a lot of reasons, Mary D. should be the one that went first. But we are doing our best to keep them secure and keeping our eye on them. And ultimately, it's going to be a great project, but it does take a lot of work to get there.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Berthew.
Would it be cost effective to get rid of the parts of the buildings that we know we're not going to keep, so that we're not maintaining those parts of the buildings? Or is that something that you can't do without certain permissions from the state?
Yeah. So the way that these transactions are set up is that we have an agreement to take the building. We won't close on that until all the financing is in place. So that the town still owns the building. We've actually invested some money on behalf of the town to help do it. We are focused just on the any repairs that would need to be made to the old. So if there's leaks in the part that's coming down, so be it. We don't really care. And that's okay, because it's coming down, but we're trying to see, but the leaks that are in the old part that are going to be preserved, that's what we're trying to focus on. So we're not going to spend bad money on anything that's going to be taken down, but it's an excellent question. But yeah, so yes, we're not going to focus that resources there.
Anything else? Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming in. I think that, this has been a great update. Let the public know what's exactly going on with this. It is still in process and still a great project. Yeah,
and we'll be back around to update whether, when we get more news, when there's something to report, we'll be around. But
that'd be great.
We are around. We're just not here in front of you, but we're working hard.
Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would say, just as a follow-up, we did have a meeting this evening with Mass Development to look at yet another potential piece of the puzzle with the funding. So that's another piece that they're working on. Again, there's probably 5 different components of this funding puzzle that have to be put together. So Mass Development was kind enough to meet us after their hours tonight so that we could sit in our office before this meeting and discuss it. So we're moving forward on a number of different fronts.
Terrific. Okay, moving on. We have a continued hearing for a petition by National Grid for a pole and wire location on Homestead Avenue. And I guess we want to open up the hearing. Are the representatives from National Grid here tonight? Excuse me.
Make a motion that we reopen the hearing.
Second.
Okay, a motion been made and seconded to reopen the hearing. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Through the chair, if I can also recommend, the board had voted at the last meeting to have Bill Coyle, DPW Director, meet with National Grid on the site. So could we invite Bill Coyle to come up as well, and then we could hear from both of them?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Coyle. Now, before we get started, I wasn't here at the last meeting because the hearing was continued. I'm sure there's been some conversations between the parties that be, and I would like to hear from National Grid first as to if there's been any changes, updates, revisions to what you're planning to do.
Well, yes, hi, Steve Susi from National Grid. When I came to the meeting last, the resident, I guess, owner of 80 Bryn Mawr Ave didn't want any poles on his side of the street, basically. Right now, if Exhibit A, I just kind of updated the drawing to include the trees and the guy wires we were going to remove. Pole 6 here, the way that we originally had it and put it in with the 2 guys, or the anchors and guys, would be 1 pole with the 2 guys, and that would support both ends of Homestead Ave to support those poles. Right now, there's tree guys into the trees, and right now, that was the old way to do it. Maybe they just stuck it up there so no one would want a pole, but now if those trees comes down, that would pull the wires down, some poles down. It's also damaging the trees. It's growing around that. So we want to remove that, but we need to have some sort of support for both those sides. On the last meeting, one of the selectmen, I forget who, but said, how many options? We want options so they could look at, say, there's 6 options. All of these I went through in my head when I visited the site, and also with Bill here as well. Originally, where the pole is, you can vote on that in pole 6, and we can put that up, and it supports both sides pretty much in line. If not, the only way I could think of, and this would be, let's see, one of the options here, that would be F, when we have push braces. So instead of an anchor going to the ground with a wire, we have a pole pushing up on a triangle against the pole. Those would support it, but For pole 5, the push brace would be right into basically the edge of the sidewalk, and how it's coming down, people would walk into that, and they would have to duck their heads to get, you know, underneath that.
Okay.
On the other side, on pole 22, putting a push brace on that, just how we have to angle it, it would go right into the street curb. It would be that close. Both, even if we could do it, we could probably squeeze it in there, but it'd be right on the pavement edge. So even talking to Bill, those doesn't seem to be an option both of us like, just because cars are going to be hitting it, people are going to be walking into those. The only thing that we could do would be, this would be Exhibit B, in order to support the poles. We could get rid of one guy. I can relocate pole 4, have a primary anchor and guy there, which would still be in front of Bethel Lutheran Church, which is 90. Would still be on their frontage. It would be still 15 feet or so away from the driveway to aid Homestead Ave. We'd still have to put a secondary guy, an anchor. The primary would be dead-ended at pole 4. Then it would just be some secondary wires feeding the church in 9. Because pole 5 is pretty much right on the pavement, I can't back guy that at all. It would go right into the street. So an off-angle guy, an anchor and guy for that would just be supporting the secondary, going to pole 9, which is almost at a 90-degree angle across the street. But that should support that. But we still need a pole 6 with an anchor and down guy to support the other side of Homestead Ave. So, you know, the pole 6 would stay in the same location, but we would just need one guy. And C and D is exhibits, it's basically the same, but since we don't have to, we're not guying pole 5 anymore, we can move that up if you wish. Pole Exhibit C, 75 feet from pole 22, right between the 2 trees. There'll be no tree cutting at all, basically. We can put secondary and a primary guy on that, and nothing, no trimming, just very incidental small branches, no major limbs. For the original, we would need probably to cut a major limb off the tree. Not bad, we could make a V shape in between both of those. Both trees would still be healthy, but we would have to cut down some major limbs. Exhibit C, there's really no cutting, just small little branches. You know, you're talking a half an inch, just small branches. And even Exhibit D, if he doesn't, people don't like that, you could try to put it in front of the tree or right in the front corner there of 80 and Bryn Mawr. More tree cutting. It wouldn't be that far off the road. It would only be 2 feet or so, and we would put a anchor and guy in back of that, but that would, we'd have to cut some major limbs off that. You know, both of those, wherever you want the pole 6 in the right-of-way. Exhibit E is just what the owner of 80 Bryn Mawr wanted. All the poles on the other side, on the church side. The problem with that, as I showed, we would have to put a push brace and an anchor onto the church property. We would need an easement from them, and they have no obligation whatsoever to grant us that easement. So they could not, and then we'd be back to having pole 6 on that side of the northern side at the 80 Bryn Mawr side.
Through the chair, if I could, because I know that you weren't here at the last meeting, the board had asked for options from National Grid. We did briefly mention it at the last meeting. The hearing was posted with a specific pole location that was advertised, so we did, National Grid did come back with options as the board was looking for, but the board technically shouldn't vote on any options because it should be another public hearing. So I think it's probably a good idea to hear from Bill Coyle now on this, but if the board decides to move forward and look at any of these other options other than what was posted, I would suggest that the board at that point close the hearing, probably vote to take no action on the first application, and have National Grid go back and do the rescheduling of another hearing, because it involves another notification that's specific to whatever option. So that being said, just keep that in mind, and then...
Thank you. Okay, National Grid, you got anything more?
Well, just on that, because even, say, option Exhibit B is in the same location, you could vote on that if you want. But also, if I can come back next week, I'd have to, and I haven't already a job, if we're going to relocate pole 4. That's another, we'd have to come back. But I need to know specifically, even this meeting, so I can write the, appropriately, the next easement petition where you want pole 6. So you want it in between the trees, you want it on the corner, you want it where it is. It is even possible to have it 15 feet or so, moved back more towards 9 Homestead, but I need to know that location so we can do a final vote next week, also on pole 4, which would be a separate work request.
Thank you. Mr. Coyle.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you. So I met with Mr. Susi last week, and we were on site for well over an hour, going over all the different options, and as you can see, there are many options. And we talked through each one of them to try to come up with what would work, what might be feasible from what they need to support the poles, and what the impacts potentially would be to the property in front of the residents, number 80, and also the church. And then actually the pastor from the Bethel Lutheran Church did come out and did have some concern about some of the options that we were discussing with push poles onto their property as well. So after going through this, and again, we spent a lot of time on it, what we thought was feasible, and it seemed as though might be something that we would not need easements, or National Grid would not need easements from on option B, would allow National Grid to remove one of the guy wires. So currently in Exhibit A on Homestead Ave, pole 6 was one utility pole, a support pole with 2 support wires, guy wires. So we felt as though we could remove one of those wires, and one of the wires that we would remove is the one that actually goes at an angle, which to me probably would have more impact to the property number 80 if you're trying to even maintain the lawn in front and going around them. So the one that would stay, looking at the drawing, would be to the left, that wire. So it'd be one pole, one guy wire, which would be more in line with the pole, almost parallel with the roadway. And then to remove that one guy wire would require then a new pole on the other side of the street and 2 guy wires. But the location of those guy wires didn't seem as though they would be any significant impact. So even though it's more infrastructure, it would allow the removal of one of the guy wires on pole 6. The other options we talked about, push poles on pole 22 into Homestead. Based on the angle of the wires, the angle of the push pole going into the pavement, the pole would actually begin to go under the roadway. So I felt that, for one, it's very close to the roadway now, becomes a potential hazard. Even when we reconstruct the roadway, we're going to potentially hit that pole as it goes under the roadway. So the options that we found, or that we discussed, and we certainly could discuss them with the property owner relative to 80, for pole number 6, is the one pole and wire has 3, or actually 4 different options of where that could go. So we could discuss that with them to say we could leave it where it's proposed. We could move it towards Bremar Ave, halfway, the distance roughly, as Mr. Susi had indicated, which would almost be ideal, because I think looking at it through the branches and the large limbs, doesn't appear as though you'd have to cut any of the limbs down. Or you could even move it closer to Bremar Ave, between the edge of pavement and the grass strip for the utility pole, with a guy wire towards their property. That one's not necessarily my preference. I mean, I'm not opposed to it. It puts a pole closer to Bremar Ave, which, is probably not ideal, but it is an option. So there are 3 options on where to put one pole and one wire in front of number 80. Again, this is all on town right-of-way, but we're trying to work with the abutter to get the minimal amount of impact. But I don't see realistically moving everything across the street to the church. For one, I don't think that the church, in talking with the pastor, agreed that the impacts wouldn't be significant. I think he felt that they would be significant in our general discussion that we had with him. And it would require easements, which I think it was the council would have to vote and approve. So those would be major infrastructure improvements to remove the pole and the wire completely. So it seemed as though option B was the best balance of impacting both sides of the street. And again, we could work with the property owner at number 80 and discuss where the best placement for National Grid and for them would be for that pole and that wire.
Okay. Is there any questions just yet? Because I do have one myself. I'll just to bring us up to speed on why this pole has to be relocated. Is there a reason for the pole have to be located in this particular position, and it can't be where it is originally?
Well, pole 6 is a new pole.
Okay.
So there was just wires into the tree trunk supporting both ends.
Okay.
So we're putting, just so that's better, so if a tree limb falls down or breaks of the tree, the whole line
okay, so this
to fall down. So
this is designed for the system.
Yes.
So that the poles will maintain themselves. We're not going to have to worry about a tree coming down and taking everything else with it.
Yes.
They're going to be, the system will be on its own.
Yes, and if it also helped the tree because, if one limb where, that guy wire is in has to be cut to save the rest of the tree, someone could do that without now going through a whole process of how we're going to install the poles.
Okay.
And the only thing, I don't know if anyone from Bethel Lutheran Church is here, but they do have a daycare center at that. So people are parking their cars and, the parents are talking and the kids are running around. So talking to, the reverend there were some issues with that as the kids are running around, they're bumping into a wire, they're bumping into the push brace. And we did, talk to Lou Aponte, who's here, but we talked to him again, both of us, when we met last week.
Okay. Before I get into the residents, can any of the board members got any questions or comments?
I'd like to hear from the residents first, and then...
I just want to be sure there was questions or not before we got into that. Is there anybody, residents, butters, anybody here that would like to speak on this? Yes. You're from Bethel, okay. Well, then I recognize you first, and I'll have you come up.
To the podium, maybe?
Yes, up to the podium, please. And would you identify yourself for the record, please?
Sure. Grover Gentry, 12 Bancroft Street, and also a member of Bethel Lutheran Church. The pastor couldn't be here tonight because he has another class that he's teaching to the kids, so I decided to come. We've got a couple other people here, too, to represent some issues. I first of all, personally, I want to say thank you, National Grid, for all the work I see you doing around town to help prevent some of these serious things from happening. I mean, you're working in my neighborhood and to help prevent major disasters, power outages that we all complain about when they happen. But regarding Bethel, we're willing to compromise on a couple things. There's a pole, I'm not sure your numbers, but the one that's at the back pole near the back of our parking lot, to move that up to the island, if that helps. The second pole, talking to the pastor the other day, was if that needs to be moved inland onto the grass a little bit close to the sidewalk. But in terms of putting another pole in, we're really opposed to that. And there's a lot of reasons. We have a lot of activity. As you said, there's a preschool all school year long, morning and afternoon, Monday through Friday, every day. We also have a lot of public adult groups that use the building. We have scouts that use the building. We have a festival, a fair, sometimes cookouts out there. And then there's services on Sunday, services on Wednesday, and then other times funerals and weddings and things like that. So we do have a lot of people that do use the building, and just another potential, whatever, what do you want to call it? I know it's necessary to have it. Another potential impediment or another potential difficulty would just, for us, not be what we want to do. But we're willing to compromise on the other two, and hopefully the neighbor would be able to compromise on the other part of it.
Okay. Thank you for coming in and your comments.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Yep. Would you please go to the podium and identify yourself?
My name is Lou Aponte. I live at 80 Bryn Mawr Ave, and Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm looking at these plans here and a couple things.
Excuse me, would you be sure you step to the microphone so we could all...
Is this better?
Thank you.
All right. Sorry about that.
No problem.
All right. So I'm taking a peek at these plans, and quite honestly, it's very difficult to judge what's happening and what's going on. So certainly having another opportunity with Mr. Coyle and Mr. Susi to review these on site would go a long way. I do want to ask Mr. Selectman, you indicated last time we were here that you had an interest of going to the site and looking on your own. Did you have a chance to do that?
I did.
Did you notice the 9 stately trees that line that particular stretch of road?
9?
9. There are 3 that are on our property, and the rest of the street there are 9 as well.
I didn't pay attention to the trees.
Okay.
I did look at the site and the stakes from National Grid that are...
Yes.
Yeah.
If I may, would you direct all your questions and comments through me? And so when it comes through me, it'll go to the whole board instead of a one-on-one with individual members.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
As I take a look at this plan...
Which plan are you looking at now?
I'm looking at Plan E at the moment. This is the one where the pole would be across the street on the church side. I'm not quite sure why the pole is put here when it could be closer to Bryn Mawr Ave, and therefore any guide wires that may need to be placed would really have no bearing on the church. The church has a small parcel of property that the kids do go out and play. I understand that, and that's where the pole is right now. But if the pole were to be moved closer to Bryn Mawr Ave, it really wouldn't be in the way because the kids don't play out there. There's no room for them to play. They don't play out there. So now if the pole is moved there, the guide wire really wouldn't have any effect on the kids in the preschool, nor anybody at the weddings, because the weddings, they congregate right around the area where the pole is now on this particular plan. So I understand your concerns. But again, I'm disappointed that we don't have better options than this. There's only one option here showing us a pole across the street, and I thought that was the whole purpose of having this meeting continued, was to take a look at options that would include having the pole not on our side of the street. Yet when we go through and we take a look at all of these, there are options of moving the pole up and down our property line. And I think that's defeating the purpose of our even being here. So I'm disappointed in the design aspect here.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Coyle. Mr. Susi, can you address that?
Yeah, if we I try to approximate these sketches as much as possible. But even where pole 6 is on the sketch, the angle to support pole 22 is too acute. It's too sharp.
And which exhibit are you looking at? Which example?
You see exhibit E.
E, okay. I just want to be sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah. So even then, we want to support our poles in line. If you go offline, you know, the amount of force isn't set up right, and the pole will start leaning.
Okay.
And that is, you know, a junction pole on 2. We have 3-phase going down that east side of Homestead Ave. So even where I put it on the sketch, it's too acute and something we want to. Putting it even more towards the corner makes it even more acute and less support.
Okay.
So we try to put stuff in line and as much in line as possible, so the poles over time don't lean over. And if you don't support it right, over time they will lean over and then cause all sorts of problems. So that's why we couldn't put it closer towards Bryn Mawr.
And Mr. Chairman, we did discuss that option when we were on site, And Mr. Susi explained the same information to me, and it makes sense that if you have wires that are creating tension on a pole, pulling it one way, you want to pull in the opposite direction to support that pole. As you start turning that angle, you start losing the support for that pole. So as you start moving towards Bryn Mawr Ave, you don't have the same angle that you need to support the pole. So it didn't seem like it was a viable option. So they have to look at making sure that they're providing the safest support that they can to protect the wires so they don't fall, which is obviously in all of our best interest. And I think it's also important to add, too, removing the guy wires. I know it's very important to the property owners that we preserve these trees. Removing these guy wires from the trees is only going to help improve the life of the tree.
It shows that this Exhibit A that you have here, that was the original, how many guy wires are going to be with that on pole 6?
It would just be 2 for both ends.
Just 2 for both ends?
Do that, and if you can, there might be secondary wires going through those, depending on how much we cut. But definitely, there'd be secondary wires and just primary wires to dead end everything.
Okay.
Guy wires, just be 2 guy wires.
Yeah, it would be 2 primary guy wires. If we have and can't cut it, we'll put secondary, but that will be judged when we do the cutting and when we can do that.
Okay, Mr. Berthium.
Exhibit A, if we do, I did pay attention to the 2 trees that are in the front or on the Homestead Ave side of 80 Bryn Mawr. So if you had mentioned that if we went with Exhibit A, then a portion of those trees would be pretty much cut out or cut?
Maybe, I mean, we're trying to look at stuff that's 40 feet up in the air, 35 feet up in the air. So based as what we can tell, and I did go with an overhead line supervisor as well, we probably, if we have to, and this all depends on the, within where I staked it, if someone, it might be 1 or 2 feet away from where I staked it, but, and they'll angle it as people get up there as well, but it's, we might not have to cut it, and if we do have to cut it, it might be just one branch, 1 leader, and that's it on the western tree.
Okay, and to follow up, when I looked at the stakes, they're on the street side of the fence. Would their fence need to be altered at all?
I also staked the 2 anchors, and those anchors will go both be sidewalk guys, so they're going straight down basically. So it wouldn't, it'll be 2 feet of the fence, yes, but they'll be going straight down. I'm assuming that fence is the lot line. And
if I may,
sure.
Through the chair, on Exhibit B, Exhibit C, that would be putting a pole in between the 2 trees. Would any of the trees be altered at that point?
For example, C, no. I think, it just small, I mean, we're talking little small branches, half an inch in diameter, just little trimming with no major limbs at all. So we could definitely get, with no cutting, the support wire, the primary, and even secondary too as well.
And you feel that pole 5 could be, well, pole 4 would need to be moved, and pole 5 would then be dead-ended? Is that what you're saying?
Well, pole 4 would have to be relocated. We can relocate it more west and still have it in the pot line. I could relocate it in the island, but when I went out there before, there was plenty of room where the lot line was and the neighbor's driveway that we could just move it west. The primary would be dead-ended. There'd be an anchor on pole 4. And then there'd be secondary only to pole 5 to feed 9 in the church. and there would just be really a secondary anchor, partly dead ending with its off angle, but it would be really supporting the secondary angle going across the street, because there's no overhead wire to the church, that's on the ground. So that really secondary wire is really supporting a lot of the wire going to 9.
Anything else? Yes, Mr. Liberty.
Looking at Exhibit E. I was wondering if it's possible at all to move pole number 5 at all to make that angle any better, to move pole 6 back across the street of Homestead, even if it were possible to move pole 5 itself across the street, if there were any options there.
The service to Bethel Lutheran Church is on the ground to pole 5. So relocating that pole would mean the church would have to pay thousands of dollars to relocate their service. That's something we can't charge as system improvement because it's someone else's house. It's fine the way it is now, so we can't, you know, to say, okay, we'll pay for that. That would be against our tariff and a legal, say, billing.
What if pole 5 were moved to be across the street? That wouldn't interfere with them at all?
Well, they have an on-the-ground service is going up and connecting on pole 5. So that we couldn't move pole 5 across the street at all. They can't, any private service cannot go underneath the street. That would require digging up the street, putting a handhole, repaving it. So because there's an underground service attached to pole 5, we can't really move that pole location without forcing the church to pay for that relocation, which most likely will be several $1,000s.
Yeah. Mr. Carpenter.
So if I'm hearing correctly, the original proposal was to insert pole 6 across the street near to a fence. We're talking about minimal tree cutting, if any tree cutting. We're talking about not adding a lot of extra poles or supports or anything else if we stick with what you originally proposed, correct?
Yes, and Plan B is just relocating, or Exhibit B would just be relocating pole 4 about 10 feet west. So you'd still, and then the old pole would be eventually removed, but you're talking 2 anchors in the public way plus pole 6, or just have 1 pole with the 2 anchors. That's the basic difference.
Continue.
My concern is where Homestead Ave is, we're not that far from Bryn Mawr School. So I don't want a lot of poles in places where kids would normally walk safely out of the street. I wanted to continue the hearing so that you and Mr. Aponte hopefully could come to some agreement. That doesn't seem like that's happened. So I think we have to pick the lesser of all evils, and to me, that's what you originally proposed. So that's the direction I'm willing to go in.
Okay.
I think it's important, Mr. Chairman, to
Yes.
note too that even with option B, option A had 2 guy wires off of 1 pole. Option B, although it would be a compromise, does add, as Mr. Carpenter is indicating, an additional guy wire. So instead of having 2 guy wires, we would now have 3 guy wires, and 2 of them in sidewalk areas. So I'd have to say, I would agree with Mr. Carpenter that when you look at the whole picture in impacting the town, option A would have less guy wires. It'd be 2 versus 3.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Lionel, go ahead.
So I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Carpenter. I guess, you know, seeing the different options and understanding now what you're saying about the acute angles and, you know, seeing where the stakes are, I think that A is, you know, it's no more impeding on that homeowner's property than any other homeowners as I drove up and down the street. So I think that where, you know, I think that we should go with what they originally proposed.
Through the chair, if I could.
Yes,
If
please.
that was the case, there could be a vote
Yes.
tonight?
Okay. Have you got any other comments?
I'd still like to have an opportunity to review these plans on site prior to having a vote. One of the options that Mr. Susi had mentioned was moving the pole west, I believe he said 10 or 15 feet.
Yeah, as for Exhibit A, pole 6 is 135 feet from pole 22. Yes, we can move poles, well, as right now with the 2 anchors, if you go with Plan B or C and relocating pole 4 and dead-ending it there, and you go with that plan, yes, instead of, we could move pole 6 in between the 2 trees, we can move pole 6 back 100 to 150 feet away from pole 22 and just have that 1 anchor. But the reason where I put it for Exhibit A, that's in line with both. So if we move it back, you know, for Exhibit A back to 150 feet or 160 feet, I have to put really an anchor on the church property, and there are no, you know, again, they don't have to give that to me.
So
otherwise, that pole would fall down. So we really, the reason why I put it where I staked it is that's pretty much in line as best as you can with both sides. I moved that 15 feet west. Now I have to put another anchor on pole 5, and they may not grant that to me, and then we'd have to go back to the original location.
Okay, Mr. Coyle?
I was just going to add, so, and I think Mr. Susi clarified that, in Exhibit A, didn't have the ability to move at 15. That would only be if we're adding another guy across the street. So.
Okay. Has anybody else got anything? It looks like I understand the design, I understand the strength of the poles, the lineup, the amount of force it takes to keep things in place. Now we're talking about possibly moving another 15 feet. The gentleman here, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and let him take a look and see if he could see it himself. He can explain exactly where it is. We may be able to come back to this at some point and on this same hearing, and he can understand exactly where and what has to happen. That would be my feeling to maybe continue this hearing so that you can explain exactly to the homeowner exactly what's got to happen here. Have you had a chance to do that?
I've already met with him twice.
You have? You've already met with him twice?
When I originally staked it, and with Bill. So at some point, you know, we went over all the options with them, and you know, sometimes, and it's up to the board. I mean, this is your right of way.
Yep.
But we're basically, those are the options, and they're not going to change. Okay. And again, if we move it back, that would only be for, you know, Exhibit B or C, well, you know, where we would have to now, I have to dead end and relocate pole 4, put an anchor in the sidewalk, put an anchor on the property.
Complete new application process
Yeah.
and hearing and what have you, okay?
And Mr. Chairman, there's no sidewalk on that side of the street. So.
There is no sidewalk, okay. All right, Mr. Berthium.
Through the chair, I just feel like, you know, we did already table it to tonight. We wanted to see, you know, what they could work out.
Mm-hmm.
We also, you know, I wanted to go take a look at it. And, you know, there's no problem with the way it was proposed. And I wasn't sure, I didn't have it clear in my head last meeting. But, you know, I drove there, I have pictures of it on my phone. There's just no reason why we shouldn't go with the original proposal. And I don't feel it's necessary to, you know, keep putting the hearing off and you know, having danger to the trees, the street, and anything else.
Thank you, Mr. Berthium. Before I Yeah, Mr. Liberty.
Through the chair, I just wanted to say that I was more inclined to agree with your assessment that we should hold it off. Maybe it's because I also missed the last meeting like you did, so I guess this is the first time I'm seeing it all. I'm familiar with the area. I've jogged Homestead and Bryn Mawr since I was 10. I'm a little disappointed that we couldn't find a way to put it across the street, but I'd love to hear from the homeowner, Mr. Aponte, you know, A, B, or C, which would be the preferred option before we decide to go with the original option. And those are my thoughts on it.
Again, I guess, before I see you, Mr. Carpenter, one of the things is we have the engineer from National Grid here, and he's explained to us the different options about the forces pulling and what the load capacities are on these poles and the wires on them, and seems to be the best option to go with. And if the homeowner has been talked to twice, he's been here at the hearing, has heard tonight what's going on, and we have the other options here. I don't know how much more you can do to go back and forth with this, so that would be my comment, that, you know, if it's been discussed, we could go over it, and we can be back here in June or July talking about the same thing and in the same options, and I don't prefer that we do that. So, Mr. Carpenter.
Excuse me. May I speak? Didn't really have two opportunities to speak to Steve. I was on my way out the door, and I had a handful of minutes to speak with Mr. Coyle and Mr. Susi. I wouldn't call that a full-fledged conversation. One of the things that was mentioned was moving the pole 15 feet. We have plans here that you folks are saying are viable, but I can't decipher that. We didn't talk about that in depth. I can't determine that from these plans, and that's why I'm saying I'd like another opportunity, and this time have a planned meeting instead of my going out the door and then seeing these gentlemen outside. That's how the second conversation took place. It was minimal at best.
I guess a part of this hearing, just as a discussion, I guess I have to hear from you is, what is the impact to your property if this pole goes in place with the Exhibit A that we have here, the original proposal? What is the impact?
Okay, so there were a couple of concerns to begin with. We've had this wire wrapped around the tree. The tree itself was used as the guide wire pole for years and years and years. Last fall, we noticed another guide wire in the tree, and that's why we're here today, is because we called National Grid to say, hey, why are you further compromising this tree by putting another guide wire in? That's why we're here. My concern is that when you put the pole in, all of a sudden the pole is going to be in, and oh, we made a mistake, we're going to have to chop down this major branch, we're going to have to do this, we're going to have to do that. I'm concerned about that. The reason why we called to begin with is because we are trying to preserve these trees, not compromise them any further. Having a pole in the wrong location potentially is going to be detrimental to those trees.
I believe they're trying to correct that location, but I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Susi because he's the one that's designing the system.
Yeah,
Right,
for Exhibit C, there'll be no tree cutting. So if you wanted the pole 6 placed within those 2 trees, there's really going to be no tree cutting on that. The major limb that might have to would be on that western tree. So by putting it in between the 2 trees, there's no need for tree cutting. So if you want to put it there, that's fine. We can do that, and we'll relocate pole 4 and go with the design for Exhibit C. But that's if that's the concern, we can go with that. That's fine. That's why I put several options.
So with that minimal conversation that we did have, that second conversation, you indicated again that it could potentially be moved west 10, 15 feet. Is that no longer feasible? Is that off the table?
It would have to be the same thing with Exhibit C, though. We would still have to relocate pole 4 and pole 5. I mean, put that anchor down there. And then That's why for basically, B, C, and D, you're doing the same with pole 4 and the secondary guy in 5. It's just, where do you want the pole? We could have put another B1 or C1 in, once we're just having that one anchor in one direction for pole 6, we can move it on the corner, in between the trees, even back farther. But that would be accepting that we have to relocate pole 4, put an anchor in the sidewalk, another anchor on pole 5, and keep it that way.
And that pole 4 is on the church property?
Yes, and even if we move that 10 feet, relocating it would still be within the church, the parking lot, and what I could think is the right-of-way.
Okay. All right. Okay. Is anybody else? Yes, Mr. Carpenter.
I guess, I like everybody to be happy, but the reality is the plan that they're proposing is the simplest, easiest, less complicated way of doing this. If we keep dragging out this hearing, so then we agree to Exhibit C, and then somebody else has an objection, because we have several neighbors on Homestead, and then they say, no, I want it moved closer to you, Mr. Aponte, and then we're back. We can't, sometimes the answer has to be no. And I think looking at this plan and looking at the options and looking at what that street is used for and how close it is to a school and children walking, it just makes sense from a public safety standpoint to not put a lot of extra equipment into a roadway or into other areas where pedestrians safely need to traverse. So looking at it that way, this is the best option. We're talking about minimal to no cutting, so it doesn't sound like they're going in there with a chainsaw tomorrow to take down the tree. It sounds like they're willing to do everything they can to save the tree. So I don't see moving it 15 feet closer to Bryn Mawr Ave is going to make anybody any happier or do anything other than cause another hearing to be posted and potential issues that I personally don't want to see on that road. So I apologize if that's not the answer you want, but that is the answer that I'm coming to based on what I have in front of me, and that's what I've got to decide. So I'm going to decide on this one, the first one, and we are going to move on, or we're going to continue the hearing depending on what the board wants to do. But to me, I think 6 is the simplest, easiest option with the least amount of hardware in that we need to add, which is in everybody's best interest.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carpenter. The reason that I had mentioned that we hold the hearing and just continue is so that Mr. Aponte has a chance to view exactly what's going on here, but I think that any delay in this is not going to help us out one way or another. I think a variation, all these variations are great, but it sounds like more equipment, and I would be in agreement with Mr. Carpenter that the minimum equipment and is a safety-related issue for the town ways. And if this is to have service reliable and the poles and equipment to be maintained in longer term, I would probably agree that this Exhibit A would be the way to go. Has anybody else got anything else? Yes, Mr. Liberty.
It seems that I'm in the minority, but I would just say that I think Exhibit C would probably be the best case if we're talking about trying to compromise. It's little to no damage to the trees, seems to fit Mr. Aponte's concerns, and I know Mr. Carpenter has some concerns about safety. Homestead's not a very busy street. I'm one street over, and Rock Ave is used mostly as a cut-through. So I don't see the problem with the added material there, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, thank you. Has anybody else got anything else? Seeing nothing, I'll like to have a motion to close the hearing.
Make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. So I guess now it comes down to what are we going to do with this? We're going to have a motion to either accept or reject what we have in front of us. What's the
I'm going to make
wish of the board?
Mr. Chairman, that we approve the position as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, the motion been made and seconded to approve the Exhibit A as presented. Is there any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Say 3-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For coming in.
Would you other departments
Sure.
are here?
Okay. Great.
Just in case anyone has-
I would like to move up, let's see, where are we here? Okay, item 5E, the May 7, 2019 annual town meeting warrant, vote to approve subject to final review by town council.
Make a motion that we second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay, we have several department heads with us here tonight. I think what we're going to do with this is, because we've been presented this, or we got this over the weekend, this gives us a chance to take a look at the articles. If there was any questions, the department heads are here to ask any questions. Otherwise, we can vote this to go to town council and at a future meeting, possibly in April.
Through the chair, correct. What we're hoping to do tonight is to have the board vote to send this to town council for review, and then come back at the next meeting, which I believe is April 8th, and at that point, you could take a position on the warrant articles. We thought that we would have all the department heads, and I see School Superintendent Miriam Brunel is here as well, in case you had any questions that you wanted to answer tonight on any of these, and then not have to think about or take a position on it for a couple of weeks, so you can absorb whatever information you learned tonight. And in the meantime, we could get it sent off to town council for review.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
there is one proposed revision to what's before you tonight, Article 31. After consulting with both the fire chief and the police chief, we decided to postpone that till the fall time.
I'm sorry, which article was that, Eddie?
31?
31.
So we're asking that you approve the warrant as presented, minus Article 31.
Okay. So that'll,
And all the, since that is being removed, then we'll have to renumber the ones from 31 on.
okay. Thank you.
I do have a question.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Carpenter, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Article 17, which is to see if the town meeting will vote to accept Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 71F pertaining to non-resident or foster care student tuition. This is by the school committee, and I have not seen that before, and perhaps I'm just forgetting, but it would be nice to get an explanation of what this is intended to.
Okay.
Dr. Brunel. Through the chair, Dr. Brunel?
Yes.
Is the sponsor of the
Dr.
article
Brunel,
for the-
yes, come up and sit with us, please. Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks very much. Thank you, everyone. So this, through the chair, this is actually a new article. It would give us the option, with some of our specialized programming that we offer for students, we have on occasion been approached by a neighboring community district to actually pay a tuition to send their child to work with us. That would only be done, obviously, with school committee approval, but also as a means to keep a program for some of our really specialized students to allow us to keep it viable.
So is this a version of school choice in reverse?
Thank you. Thank you.
So through the chair, I think you could probably look at it that way. It's for a child with, we're really looking at it for a specialized population of students, so similar to school choice, but rather than the monies coming directly from the state, the sending district would actually pay, and it would go into an account that we would use as an offset to the budget.
Do you anticipate having to hire additional staff depending on the needs of the student, and would that be borne by the sending community, or would that be something we would be expected to take part of?
So through the chair, that's a great question. We would only open up opportunities to accept students into these programs if it meant we didn't have to hire additional staff. So if we had openings, because sometimes the number of students that we have can rise and go down. So by having someone come in, it would actually keep the program viable for us.
Through what grades would it be? Through kindergarten through 12? Is it narrowed down? Is there...
So through the chair, I would say to you, we're really looking at keeping it wide open, so it would be any of our program. We have specialized programming for students as young as preschool and up through age 22, all of which are our responsibility. So it would be wide open, and it would be based on, so long as we were meeting our students' needs, this would be an opportunity to bring other children in, so long as it had nothing but a positive impact on the program.
This isn't anything that the state requires that we do. This is a something you're taking on for the Auburn school system.
Correct. It is. It'd be right through the for the benefit of our students, and we may not even use this option. We don't have any plans to do so immediately, but having this article approved would give us the option to do so in the future.
Anybody else got anything? I guess just as a follow-up question, are there any other systems using it? And how good is the program?
There are other school districts in the area that do this. They sometimes share staff even, but really for students, we were approached probably about 7 or 8 years ago by a neighboring district. They had one student with really specialized needs and didn't have any other students in the school, and we had a few in our district. We weren't able to take that child in because we didn't have a mechanism to collect the tuition.
I see.
So it is used by school districts around the Commonwealth.
Okay. And so we could, in turn something over. Will this it'll allow students into our system, but will allow students out of our system?
Only if the receiving district had this mechanism to accept the tuition.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you very much.
I have a few more.
Yes, Mr. Carpenter.
Article 21, I know this, it is see if the town meeting will vote to appropriate the sum of $200,000 from community access enterprise retained earnings for Camp Gleason. I know it's been broached informally with the board. I was just wondering, what are the plans? Have they been cemented? I've heard different things happening over there. I just would like to know.
Ms. Jacobson.
Through the chair, we have had several meetings internally with DPW and our cable television manager and the CFO to look at potential funding sources for the renovation and rehabilitation of Camp Gleason into meeting space. As you know, we're out of meeting space. We have this room, we have the planning board room. That's really all we have in town hall. This would be the largest room. It still doesn't have the capacity for larger meetings that we've had to turn away in town because we just have no place to have that. We also have run out of space at our senior center. We have some critical space issues up there where we have programs that have been successful, thankfully, and they've grown, but because they've grown, now they're competing for the same room because there's only one large room and the other rooms are small. So our intent was to utilize the revenues from the Cable Access Enterprise Retained Earnings Fund to renovate Camp Gleason into a space that could be utilized for meetings such as this or any other community events or community meetings that have the ability to be televised on cable television. That way it would not be a cost to the taxpayer or come out of the enterprise fund, and it would give us another space for televised purposes of all kinds of events, whether it be a program, whether it be a public meeting, a community event. So we have met, I turn to Bill Coyle if I'm saying this incorrectly, but we've had some initial discussions. We've met down there with DPW and facility management, come up with some recommendations for how we would renovate the space, what it would look like, what we would need to do, including handicapped accessibility. It could be a beautiful building. Potentially, if we're not using it, we could even rent it. There's enough demand in town for renting of such facilities for meeting space. And we were going to look to see if we could get an initial recommendation from an architect to look at it, but I turn to Mr. Coyle, if that's okay, for more detail.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Julie. We did reach out to an architect, and we had a meeting on site with an architect as well, and we did also receive some proposals. We felt that they were probably more than what we were anticipating, so we revisited the scope of the project and felt as though some of the design work is something that we could do in-house through engineering and work through the building department, the building commissioner, and scale back some of the scope of the project. And we felt that's something we could do internally with our own staff, engineering, and also with our facilities group as well to do the work, the bulk of the work. Obviously, some of the trades, we'd have to sub out the electrical and plumbing type of work, but a large percentage of it would be done in-house.
I can just follow up, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
on that.
and then I'll get to you, Mr. Berthium.
Yeah, and this perhaps is going beyond the article itself, but what budget impact does this have once it's online? Let's put it that way.
Through the chair, as far as it would be additional heating costs. Honestly, right now, we're stretched for space in so many different ways. We do use our senior center in the evenings for events, and we still, on occasion, do have to pay staff to come in and open that facility. So, you know, like we've done here, we've put in electronic keypad entries, which we could do at Camp Gleason as well. So it would really be the cost of heating the building and the electrical costs to that building.
Thank you.
Mr. Berthium.
I'd just like to throw a comment out, and again, it's kind of getting away from the actual article, but I'm really pleased to hear that you think that we can do some things internally with the Camp Gleason building. When I was younger, we had a camping organization, and we rented that building many, many times, and it's got a wonderful upstairs like hall to it. The downstairs had plenty of room for a separate meeting. It's really a great facility for what we're proposing to do, or what you're proposing to do with it. I would encourage and like to see, being that, you know, we're always hearing about the town of Auburn paying for Bay Path students and everything else. I'd love to see some of the electrical and plumbing and some of that maybe being in conjunction with a school like Bay Path. But I'm excited to see the reuse of this building finally. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else got anything?
I have a couple more.
Well, before we do, Mr. Coyle, you've had the architect, I'm sorry, you had the architect there and they've gone through the building. The $200,000 you've got here for what you want to do, will that suffice for that building? I guess my question is the building structurally sound, or would there have to be some major
There would be some,
renovations?
we were looking at potentially some improvements to the foundation along the side of the pond itself. It all depends on ultimately how we move forward on the scope. You step up currently to a stage area, and then also to where it's a balcony off the back of the building. So we have to look at exactly how, once we get into it and we start removing some of the ceilings and look and see how it's framed, and determine the best course of action. We'll try to minimize what we need to do, obviously, to reduce the costs, but we'll have to meet code once we get into it. We felt $200,000 was adequate for what we were going to need to do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Carpenter.
We can't waste their time, Mr. Chairman, right? We made them stay up late, so we have to make sure that they stayed up for a good reason. On Article 22, to see if the town meeting will vote to appropriate a sum of money from general fund revenues for the purchase of a new hosted email solution for the town of Auburn. I know we were rehabbing or redoing the websites. Was this part of that I just missed?
I'm sorry, what was that last comment?
The website, I know we were doing those. Was this part of or envisioned as part of, or did this come out of that?
No, it's a totally different item. We were informed by the IT director, Mike Marino, that we are facing some required changes to this system because it presently, right now, is compromised. Mr. Marino, we put a sum of money, I think he's estimating it to be in the vicinity of $20,000 to make us compliant with updated regulations, and so our system in any way will not be compromised. It's really a security issue. He informed us of this shortly before the town meeting warrant opened. I think there are some deadlines that we need to meet in order for us to continue receiving data. I think it was maybe late summer or someplace in that vicinity that this work really needs to be done.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I do have a couple others.
Mr. Carpenter, go ahead.
Article, these three are all from the sewer superintendent. Article 27, 28, and 29, and I think Article 30.
Okay. Is Mr. Mitchell, would you come up and join us, please?
Good evening.
Good evening.
So on 2.2 million, was this related to in some way the Upland Street issue? If I recall, you're asking to
Not
borrow money?
necessarily directly related, but it got people thinking of issues that could arise. This is something that's somewhat been on the back burner for quite a few years, has been discussed, dropped, and then brought back. Whereas we're noticing that the system is aging. This $2.2 million could turn into $3 or $4 million if we ran into an emergency without being proactive. What we're trying to do is put a second pipe across the intersection. This goes diagonally across the intersection of Route 20 and Greenwood Street. And it's the main line that comes out of, it basically takes all of the wastewater from the entire town over to the treatment plant.
Now, if I remember correctly, didn't we talk about that some time ago? There was a Pinrock Road station that you had a problem with, and this is all part of that. This is just following through with that because of the problem with that and with all the trucking you had to do?
Because if that station, or if, let's take for example, if the, that force, we call it a force main, which is the pressure line coming out of the station to the treatment plant, if that was to be compromised at all, we would have to shut the entire sewer system down and be running somewhere in the area of 35 septic haulers to take care of the waste of the entire town, which would be incredibly expensive. It would be a nightmare to try to coordinate and even have, we'd be buying septic haulers, companies, because they'd be working for us around the clock if it was something that couldn't be fixed in a hurry. So we're trying to be proactive, before this would happen.
Well, having looked at the bills from Upland Street, I see how expensive it can be when you have
That was only
critical fail.
That was only one station, so.
Article 28, you're asking for $220,000 through retained earnings to perform flow monitoring?
Yes, DEP has come up with new guidelines now for I&I, or infiltration and inflow requirements of any type of sewer systems. We had done a project back, I believe, in 1999 where we started the process. We did the same type of work, but unfortunately now it doesn't meet today's guidelines through DEP. So what we need to do is they require for every 20,000 lineal feet of piping system, we need to put a monitor in, monitor it for a period of time during wet weather to see how much inflow is, or how much flow is going through the pipe compared to, water usage and actual flows through the pump stations.
So this monitoring system then is not going to be permanently placed in the system anywhere?
No.
You're just this is going to be something you'll test
Yes.
periodically throughout the system?
Well, right, there'll be, I think we're putting in 22 meters for the entire system, and once we get the data that's needed, there'll be a report compiled, and then from that, we're going to set up a budget, a capital program to spend X amount of dollars per year in order to remove whatever I this flow monitoring will show that we need to remove. Because I is basically, it's stormwater or groundwater that we have to pay to treat that we can't bill for. Or we don't have, we have to bill it, but it's through customers that, the sewer user fees are based on water use. So you use X amount of gallons of water, that's what your bill is. The groundwater is just an extra cost.
Okay.
Article 29 is to see if town meeting will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to submit legislation to amend the Acts of 1963, Chapter 708.
Yes. The Acts of 63 was legislation that was established, which started the actual, to establish the sewer system in town, which at the time appointed the Board of Selectmen as an interim sewer commission. Once the votes were taken, then an actual sewer commission was established, and which allowed the commission to enter into contracts, install sewer lines, make rules, regulations, and whatnot throughout the years. A lot of history there, but the problem being is when this was initially enacted in 1963, the cost for the way the language is written to make amendments to the regulations, might have been, pennies on the dollar. Now, for us to make one addition to the regulations, one paragraph, it could cost us $2,000. And our rules and regulations are so outdated, we'd have to, put a whole line item in order to do it. So we felt it better to try to change the legislation to loosen things up a little bit and get more into publicizing things through a website, hard copies at the town hall, the clerk's office and whatnot, rather than advertising it as it states now in a local newspaper. So that's the main reason.
This is about advertising and about producing reams of paper for
yes.
interested parties to look at. That's the extent of the amendment?
Yeah, expenses. The big time expense is the driver of it, because and some of the legislation doesn't necessarily parallel the regulations, and we've had some issues. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. Last was Article 30, to see if the town meeting will vote to abandon the permanent and temporary sewer easements identified as PE 26 and TE 21. I guess I'm just curious as to what it is that why, and I guess I'm going to stop at why.
We were approached by Central One Federal Credit Union, and they are expanding their business in town. I think it's an administration building that they're looking to put up, and in order to do so, they've purchased some land, demoed one house that was there, and unfortunately, our sewer line is right in the middle of where they want to put the building. So basically, what we're going to do is, or they're going to do, I should say, is abandon the existing one, move it down further, and just basically relocate it.
So in return for us abandoning the easements, they're going to pay to rectify the system?
No cost to the town. That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Carpenter?
I have one more.
Continue.
Just because 34, which is the tiny house bylaw.
We invite Adam Menard up, the town planner.
Okay, would you have him come up?
Certainly. Through the chair, if that's okay, I'd like to have Adam Menard, the town planner, come up, our tiny house author, along with the planning board.
So I did get to see some of the hearings, and it seems like this has been on a run as opposed to not a marathon, but on a sprint. So I'm a little concerned with how the process has been undertaken, because I don't feel that we should have petitions and then have us do the work. So I guess I'm just a little concerned that on February 26th, somebody walked into the planning board and asked for something, and now we're here. And from my experience with planning regulations, it's not a good thing to be doing it on the fly. Not that I think you did a great job, but still, I guess part of my question is, can we rectify that, the petition process? Because I think they came in with basically just an ask of tiny house, and to the staff's credit, they put together a pretty impressive proposal. So I'm just concerned with some of the questions that I heard at the planning board, you know, and it seemed like there was give and take, and there was, well, what does this mean? I don't want us to accept something or create something and then have problems later, is my concern. So if you can explain how, and I know that there were some suggestions that this was taken from Nantucket, of all places.
Yeah, and Nantucket at this time is the only town in the state that has a tiny home bylaw of any kind on record. What they have is very minimal, about a paragraph long. It basically allows tiny homes as an accessory use. What I've drafted is much more restrictive. It's trying to limit the extent of the allowable use of tiny homes in town. It was kind of brought on to us kind of suddenly, like you said, and they did go through the citizens petition, and they came to the planning board and requested the planning board sponsor our own bylaw, which the planning board decided to do. As for changing how that's done, I really don't know. I don't think it was something that can easily be done, but certainly something to be looked at in the future, because it's certainly not realistic for us to sponsor a bylaw every time somebody decides they want to make a zoning change, though they do have that right to ask. Say the current draft that you have is being vetted by town council, so they may have some more comments as to what we can and cannot do to restrict the tiny home use. So.
Yes, and I want to be clear that I'm not opposed to the intent at all. I think it's a very innovative idea, and I credit everybody for coming up with it. My concern is just how the process unfolded, and it's also my concern that in such a compacted time, I mean, when we did the general bylaws, how many years did that take? We're in the process of a master plan process, and we're doing a zoning bylaw as well. So we're involved in a lot of planning processes, but we're not giving those entities the time to make a good decision, or even if they're in agreement with it. So that's, I guess, another one of my concerns is I think the intent is great, and I understand why the petition was the way it was, but I'm very concerned about going forward how this was handled and how this is going to play out if somebody next year does this, and what if we say no to them, but we said yes to this group? You know, equal treatment is a great concern of mine. You know, I don't want a resident to come in thinking this is the way to get a bylaw in quickly, is my concern. Not that it's not a good idea, not that it's not wonderful, but again, we're in the middle of some pretty important planning processes, so to throw something totally into the mix without giving those boards the time to consider it, including the planning board, you know, is of concern to me.
Okay. Through the chair, I just want to clarify,
please.
the planning board had wanted to create this bylaw, correct?
Correct.
So the planning board had asked the town planner to move, which is why the town planner worked on this. So the planning board felt that it was a tight time frame, but they had enough opportunity to hold the required public hearings?
Yeah, the required public hearing is scheduled for April 9th, so that'll take place. The the current draft that you have also has gone to the ZBA, so they'll have their opportunity to comment. It is a quick timeline, but planning board asked me to draft this, so that's what I did.
We got anything else? Well, at this point, thank you very much, Adam. Thank you. I'd like to move up item 6B, and that's for Articles 23 and 24.
Do you want us to motion this?
Yes,
first?
please.
I would make a motion that we send this to, or we approve the draft, omitting Article 31 and
Oh,
subject...
well, hang on. We're still going to do Article 23 and 24. We're just going to move this up so that we can get that addressed.
Oh, okay.
Okay, because we do have
that's
our
I thought they were
head
two
assessor
separate
here.
items, but
Nope.
that's fine, Mr. Chairman. I would make a motion that we move up item 6B then.
Okay.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, we'll go over to Article 23 and 24. And if we could have, would you have her come up, please?
Yep, through the chair, Cindy Cosgrove, our assessor, is going to come up. And just as a reminder to the board, a couple of years ago, the board had asked us to appoint a committee to look at tax exemptions and abatements, and this was the second go-around on that. I think there may be 3 years in between. And Ed and Cindy and a couple of residents. Lionel represented the board, Selectmen, on this.
Sorry. Oh, yes, on that.
Welcome, Cindy.
In my agenda
thank you.
again.
So this is the results of that working committee working group, to come up with recommendations and incorporate it into these 2 warrant articles.
Okay.
Cindy, can you
Please.
just briefly overview what it is?
Basically, I do want to thank the members of the group that got together. We managed to put together, there are 2 articles which cover 4 items. I don't know which order you have them numbered in on the warrant, but the first article that I have here is the one for the 41C, and it's going to change the gross receipts limit for people to qualify for that exemption. For if they're married, to $30,000 and $55,000. We had previously changed the limits for the singles to the maximum. This will bring the married limits up to the same amount. So that's the first part of this. We're also reducing the age down to 65 to help a few more people qualify. And then we're reiterating that we're going to continue to index those new amounts that we have to qualify for assets by the Consumer Price Index that's published by the Department of Revenue for our use.
I guess my question is, Cindy, the exemptions, if this goes through, the exemptions will be granted, will be starting for a fiscal year beginning on or after July 1st? So there won't be anything retro. It'll be something from July 1st, 2019 going forward.
Correct. When people send in their applications for the fiscal year 2020 bills, which will start the end of September, and they have through the end of March of next year to submit them, those are the first ones that would be affected by this.
Okay, thank you.
The second article that's here, basically what we did is we voted, we're allowed to increase the amount of the exemption by a percentage, and we did vote to increase it by 40%, bringing the total amount when they max out the exemption up to $1,400 per year.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Okay, being none. Thank you very much for coming in. Now we'll go back to the warrant itself. Are there any further questions? Being none, we want to move that forward and send it along to council. So we'll need a...
We'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to approve this subject to final review by town council. The warrant omitting Article 31.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion, comments, questions? Being none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. And we will have a chance to come back to this, and we will go through, you know, and just recommend, not recommend or defer.
Through the chair, may I ask
Yes.
one thing? We have one more person here who's waiting for this, and then
That's item 6.
item 6G.
6G. Can we move up item 6G, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right, LED streetlight project update and schedule.
Through the chair, I'd like to invite our energy manager, Matt Benoit, up to the table to give you some good news, and we just wanted to report to you on our LED lighting project, and after many months, back to August of 18, we finally have been able to negotiate with National Grid and get our purchase agreement in place. I believe we signed it on Friday, so we're just giving you an update as to what the next steps are in this process.
Welcome, Mr. Benoit.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Town Manager Jacobson. Yes, it is great news that we finally have a nice forward-moving update for the LED streetlights. I've just handed out a executive summary. It was part of our investment grade audit produced by Real Term Energy, who's been our project management team throughout the process here. These are some of the rough numbers, well, estimated numbers for our entire project, which helped us secure the funding that we needed at our previous town meetings. So I just wanted to share those with you most importantly, but I just want to talk about some of the delays that we had gone through and why the project has taken so long to this point. Some of the things we had to go through, mostly legalese with National Grid and contracts regarding insurance and liability requirements. We had to get additional coverage that we typically don't do for projects, but it's something that was a requirement as part of National Grid's contract. National Grid, as most of you know, was on strike for a part of the winter, and there was also some software updates that had them at a disadvantage to get our contracts rewritten. So ultimately, we had about 7 months in delays just in the contract negotiations on our own. However, that did allow me to do some digging on our lights and our inventory. And generally, how this works is towns use the inventory that National Grid provides them. They get the lights changed out just as is, and then they go around town finding out which lights are white and which ones are still yellow, and then they start asking questions. Well, since we had the downtime to do this, I was able to identify those lights for the audit that was done by Real Term Energy and cross-reference it with National Grid's audit to identify the remaining lights that are on here. So we got a little ahead of the game in the process. It also updated our buyback costs, which ended up being $6,000 less than we anticipated. Another part that was less than we anticipated were the wireless controls. Once these streetlights go up, we're going to be able to remote control dimming, or the DPW is going to be responsible for, and that cost came in less than we thought also. So not only were we able to save some money that we're anticipating, we did finally get all the documents signed, and we're looking at proceeding the ordering parts and procurement over the next 2 to 4 weeks. Staging area will be at Julia Bancroft, because that's not one of the buildings that's being used currently. And at a point in late April and early May, the installation should begin.
Wow, great. Great, that is good news. We've been kind of waiting to see if, because I remember the cars going around town and they were evaluating the system and, you know, probably doing their surveys, and now it's going to come that we're actually going to start to see. Is there a particular area around town they're going to begin in, or is it just going to be...
Not sure yet.
Not sure.
No,
okay.
But they've given us some neighborhood models based on their science. So with commercial areas would probably be better lit than residential's, just because you're using more intensity bulb. Some are 250 watts versus 50. But we try to make sure that we're not putting commercial grade bulb in residential areas and stuff like that. So, but I'm sure that they will map out a plan for us and give us a general neighborhood strategy. What we intend to do is put out a newsletter to the residents, let them know that the trucks will be in the area during a certain time period, try not to interfere with the workers or anything, or ask questions. They could always route them through me at the town hall. And I'm obviously available to any of you for questions throughout the process too.
Great.
And through the chair, just a reminder that we did receive a grant from the Green Communities for this program for $239,000. So that was preserved by getting this project underway in time. They did extend the state. It was great. They extended the deadline.
Yeah, so we have two grants as part of this project. One is a 30% reduction grant on installation costs. That was extended to the end of this month and receiving a future extension to the end of May. And I provided the update to the state at DOER, and there is a mechanism for us to extend the original grant deadline, which is May 31st. They seemed very receptive to the delays that were completely out of our hands. It wasn't caused by ourselves. So they gave me a mechanism to apply for an extension if we need. So that was very encouraging also. And as Ms. Jacobson mentioned, when you see the costs in front of us here, the net project cost down the bottom does not include the grant. And the grant was $229,599. So you're looking at an overall project cost of about $100,000 for the town for a project that could cost $450,000 in total.
Sounds like it's a win-win.
Yes, sir.
It's awesome. That's great. And thank you for going along, and thank you for coming in and giving us that update. We appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Are there any questions? Mr. Berthew?
Quick question, are there any safety concerns with the staging being at JB? What are we staging there? Trucks or inventory of lights? Or are they going to be in locked trailers? That type of thing.
What I'm anticipating, and this is still in the planning stages, I was talking to Kenny Fairbanks about this earlier, the access to the gym would be for storage materials, probably using the side door to access the facility, and then the trucks will go pick up the equipment they need and then go out. As needed, they do intend to hire police details as needed in busy intersections. That was part of the contract to begin with, so those parts are still in the planning phases, and as we're ordering and getting closer, those will be fine-tuned with the DPW.
Anything else?
Good job.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
And thanks for coming in tonight. Sure thing. Good to see you, Matt. Okay, let's see. Let's go back to where we are here. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like no communication, so we'll go to 5A, which is a vote on the 2019 annual license renewals for second-hand junk licenses. Okay. You've got papers in front of you. It looks like the DCG has been approached. There is a letter to Chief Slokas, but the DCG has also had a representative of the police department there, and the DCG at this point has no specific concerns about granting the two licenses. That's Hanush Jewelers and GameStop Incorporated at the Auburn Mall. What's your pleasure?
I'll make a motion in order to approve the license renewals, provided that all applicable requirements of the state and town and any of its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled. Said license is subject to all conditions stated upon it. Failure to comply with any and all the conditions shall invalidate the license and render it null and void.
Okay. The motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. On to 5B, gift acceptances. We have one here from for the DPW Highway Division and goods of a granite countertop from Proline Service.
Make a motion that we accept with gratitude and that a letter be signed and sent to the grantee.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Excuse me. Yeah, we'll get one in a minute there. Thank you. Okay. No, there's no proclamations or recognitions tonight. Now we have item 5D, discussion and vote on the language of the ballot question regarding the plastic bag ban that will be on the annual town election ballot, which is included in the May 2019 annual town meeting warrant.
Through the chair, I'll just explain this. As the town clerk has pointed out to us, if you look on the last or second to the last page of the warrant, every year there is a list of all the items that appear on the ballot at the back of the warrant. So the board had already previously taken a vote to send a question related to the plastic bag ban or reduction, and we need to get the work on the wording, to be included as a non-binding referendum question on the May election. So over the next couple of weeks, as town council is reviewing the warrant, we just need to give him the gist of the question that the board would like to have on there. So you don't necessarily have to vote it tonight. We put it on there in case you did. We wanted to cover it. But really tonight we just need the discussion of what exactly is that question. And then town council can work with us on the legal portion of it. But we want to make sure that we're approaching this the way the board wanted it approached. In other words, some communities will put on there, vote to, are you interested in having a bylaw to prohibit the use of plastic bags in Auburn? Some people will put on it, towns will put on it, are you interested in having a bylaw to increase plastic bag use reduction? So I guess we're trying to get the gist from the board as to what you want for wording on this, and then town council can work to develop that language and bring it back to you for April 8th.
Okay. Comments? Questions? Mr. LaLiberty.
So something that I've talked about with Mr. Carpenter in the past is how the wording can be misleading, and it has been. We've used the term plastic bag ban to describe it, and I think that's fine here. But to put something like that on would be really misleading, as Mr. Carpenter pointed out in conversations we've had. It's not really banning all plastic bags. I mean, we could in theory do that, but the majority of towns in Massachusetts, and what we would likely base it on if we were to move forward, would be something that allowed for marine degradable, compostable, and biodegradable plastics that are still considered plastics, but would be exceptions. So I just ask that we keep that in mind and going forward with figuring out the wording of this.
Okay. Mr. Carpenter.
I think it's tough to word it because I think there is a lot of misconceptions. We're not banning, you know, the plastic bags for meat and fish, you know, for produce. We're actually, I think it's one-time use. Isn't that the best description that we can say of it?
Right.
That it is a one-time use. I don't even know if you want to call it a grocery bag, but something like that. Because I think if you're not specific enough, everybody's going to think, oh my God, we're not going to have any plastic anywhere. And what am I going to do?
Okay. Well, I guess in regards to those comments, I guess how would council put together a question for the warrant with some of the comments we've had here tonight? What could he go by? What kind of guidelines does he need? What can we give him, or
We
what
need
can
to
we
know
offer
the
him?
key, through the chair, we need to know the keywords that you're looking for. So as Selectman Carpenter just said, do you want to have the question phrase that, do you want to develop a bylaw to ban or prohibit one-time use plastic bags, not to include the following? It still has to be simple enough that people understand that the real detail to this, if it goes forward, it's a non-binding referendum question, but the real detail to this is what happens when the bylaw is developed. Excuse me, that's
Because it has to coincide with the vote people took, the way they understood it.
Well, in this case, the vote that people take would be a non-binding referendum, just to determine if you want to move forward to create a bylaw.
Okay.
So this one doesn't have to be specific to exactly all the details of it, but enough that the public understands that if, right, you're asking them if you should move forward to the next step, and the next step is the development of a bylaw, which then has to go through town meeting, it has to requisite public hearings.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Berthew.
I like the idea of the use of the word reduction. I also think that, you know, in order for it to go forward, we really need to have some sort of a chart that explains each type of bag. This bag, because you hear like single use, multiple use, for most people, if they go to Shaw's and they buy that bag, it's a single use because they throw it away. So there really needs to be a definition of a bag, a name for that bag, and then we need to be specific about what bag we are reducing in town or banning in town. But again, I think, as the town manager said, we can at least start with its simplicity in saying that, you know, would you like to vote, or would you be interested in a reduction in plastic bag use? Because I think that's the theme here, is that we want to reduce the amount of plastic bags used, wasted, thrown out on streets, that type of thing.
Thank you. Anything else? Mr. Carpenter?
Just a point, because we said we didn't want to advocate as a board. So are we crossing that line by providing additional information? Because we said we just wanted a question. We don't want to start mailing things out and advocating. So I think the more we get into it, I think if we start putting together charts and everything else, I think we're potentially, and I could just be being overly conservative, but we might be straying into an area that we said, or a majority of the board said they didn't want to cross. So that's, but I do think the balloon that you floated about reducing the bags, I think is probably the simplest way of saying it, and, you know, those type of things.
I agree with Mr. Carpenter. I was actually talking very simple for the town meeting question, or the vote question, and then the other detailed thing would be further on when we get into the, so I totally agree with you.
Tristan, do you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to, again, say I think reduce or reduction would probably be the best choice of words. I mean, depending on what we'd want to do if it went forward would be, we may decide that we don't want it to apply to all businesses in town. Maybe smaller ones would be exempt, or maybe bags over a certain thickness would be fine. So saying an all-out ban would really limit us if moving forward. I think being as general as possible would give us the best options if it were to move forward. I do think, though, that something along the lines, letting people know that this wouldn't apply to bags that you use for fish, meats, produce, and then also that it's not going to affect all types of plastic. How you would word that, I'm not necessarily sure, but I think those would be necessary to add in there, that those wouldn't necessarily be included in this.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm just going to turn to you and ask with the comments. Can you throw those to our friend?
Here's what I have now. I just want to make sure. I just want to get the gist of what to give to Attorney Hennigan, and then he could work with us on it. But I just had one question. Not to include the meat or...
Meat, fish, produce.
Yeah, meat, fish, produce. Oh, it also includes, I did newspapers and dry cleaning. Yeah, thank you.
So basically, here, I want to see if I have this right. So however this gets worded, do you support the development of a bylaw for single-use plastic bag use reduction, not to include meat, fish, produce, dry cleaning, materials, bags. But bags, something along that end. Give it that to town council, and at least he has an idea of what we're trying to accomplish, and see if he can come back with a recommendation. Do we have all the key words, though? We want reduction.
Okay.
And we're not leading the voter to either. You're just asking them if they want to support a bylaw, the development of a bylaw, in which case there's a whole public meeting process that everyone will have time to weigh in on all the details.
Yeah, they want to see which bags they, you know, if we're going to have a ban, these are the kind of bags I'd be interested in, these are bags I would not be interested. So maybe that would be the way to go. So if you could...
So is that close enough to at least give to...
I like it.
I should add to it?
Is there a way to look at how other communities did it? I know there's now 80-plus communities that have adopted it. Is there a way, I know it's probably not in a central location, that we can just kind of look at it and say, how did they, and of course they may have adopted it directly versus how we're going about it.
We did look at some of them, and I know Mr. Liberty had done a lot of research on it. Quite a few of them were done by citizens petition, so there wasn't the ballot question per se, because citizens got together and put out a petition, and that was the basis for then the bylaw. So we can continue to look. We weren't able to come across anything specific to this where it was just a simple question. If it's out there, we'll borrow the language.
I like that.
Why repeat it if it's been done?
Yeah, no, I was just hoping to hopefully give us something of a guide, but I knew that a lot of it was by citizens petition, but...
Yeah, and one was by special legislation, I think, at one point. So did you, through the chair, I believe the packet that you had provided to us had a list of all, and I have a list also of all the communities that had actually passed a bylaw. The question is, I don't think it narrowed down which communities actually had it by ballot question.
Right. I was relieved to hear that you hadn't found any, because I hadn't either. So it's good to know that I didn't miss anything. I think it's up to 90. I checked earlier today, towns, so there might have been some added to it. That's a little out of date now, the packet that I had originally made. The only town, or not even a town, the only ballot initiative I could find was the state of California. So, I mean, it might have something of value to look at, but that's all.
You're not approving any travel to the state to look up anything.
I do know that town council just wanted some guidance from the board as to what you're trying to accomplish. Again, this is a non-binding question anyway. You're just looking to get the general opinion of the voters as to whether we should proceed to actually start developing a specific bylaw.
Simple is best. However we can make it not in the Queen's English.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Anybody got anything else on that one? Okay, so we'll move up to item 6C.
This will be quick. Just wanted to put a copy in your packet of the summer concert, Summer in the Park concert series at the Dr. Arthur and Dr. Martha Pappas Recreation Complex. Want to thank Ken Fairbanks and Bill Coyle for their work on this. We have a 12-week series again this summer, and we don't have sponsors on here yet. We tend to find that sponsors come in over the next few weeks, but we did have to get the bands secured. So the sponsors, any sponsorships that come in, offset the cost of the overall program. The rest of it comes out of the revolving fund from recreation. And again, this is a free concert series from 6 to 8 on Thursday evenings, always with a rain date of the following Tuesday, should we need it. And I want to just let you know, and I did mention at the last meeting, but worth saying again, we are looking to form a farmer's market on Thursday evenings to coincide with the times of the concert, probably start a little bit before. I believe we're looking from 4 to 8 on Thursday evenings. We thought it would be a great boon for the concert goers to be able to go and also have a nice farmer's market, and for those who come to the farmer's market who may not have realized there was a concert there. So I think it will be a nice blend. So we're working really hard on getting that together. Kristen Pappas has been working on it with Eileen and DDIS and the Packagug Church.
Terrific. Okay. Item 6D, the Independence Day celebration.
Through the chair, just a note, as the day has been selected, it's Monday, July 1st, with a rain date of Tuesday, July 2nd. And we did have to get this date solidified because the fireworks company has so many that are going on. It's always a challenge to get some dates available. So those are our dates, and I just found out today, it's not official, but I will mention it because we'll be hearing it probably at the next meeting, that Bank Hometown, again, we applied for, and we're receiving a grant for $2,500 to pay for the concert and some of the other affiliated costs with the program. And last year, we did have a couple of sponsors that stepped forward and asked what they could do to help. So we'll be working to get everything in place, but we want to get on your radar screen that we have these dates.
Great. Anybody else? Anything else? Okay, we go to 6E. It's about April 8th. And I'll turn it back over to you,
again,
Julie.
just a reminder, and we'll be posting this, but we had the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant, MVP grant. We had a full-day planning session about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. And this is another component of this state grant that we received, that we now have to have a listening session. So we scheduled it to start at 6 p.m. the evening of your Board of Selectmen meeting, hoping that you could be here. It's not technically a public hearing, although it could be presented as a public hearing. It's more of a listening session to just present what the findings are and give the public another opportunity to listen to the information that we've collected to date. So that will be done by our town planner and our consultant through this grant.
Okay, anybody, anything? All right, we'll go to E. We've already finished E, we'll go to F, 2019 Citizens Leadership Academy.
This is the last time I have, just to let the board know, we did receive, I believe we had 17 applications. 15 have confirmed for participation, including Selectman Carpenter. So we will be starting this Thursday evening with our first class of the Leadership Academy, and it graduates on June 6th. So we have 15 participants that are confirmed and 2 that may confirm between now and Thursday. They did apply, and we're accepting everyone who had applied.
Great. Sounds like going to be another successful program.
We hope so.
Okay, we have no...
It'll be exciting. We again, once again, have our challenges to see which department can have the most fun interactive activities to keep everybody entertained. And it's hard to keep up with police and fire and
well, I don't know.
Golf carts, but...
One of these days, I'm going to get a chance to drive the loader.
Yeah. Well, I think finance has come up with something that we met on today that may be very entertaining. So.
Oh, there you go. Dan, be prepared.
Is that a good way to put it?
Anything that requires a special license, I will not be operating.
Okay. Any public comments? Being none, we have minutes from the February 25th meeting. Any errors, corrections, omissions?
It wasn't present, so I cannot.
Okay. Being none, we'll submit those as presented. And being nothing else on our meeting, yes, Mr. Berthew.
I'd just like to say a couple of things. First of all, that I'm sure Ed has something, because I know that accounting is super exciting. I can't wait to hear the results of that one. But I also wanted to just, I didn't want to step back with the concert series and all of that, but I do want to especially thank, Ken Fairbanks, Bill Coyle, and I think that we don't hear, I'm glad you said the name Kristen Pappas, because she is all over town. She is doing all kinds of activities. I was just involved a couple of weeks ago with the Special Olympics. She set up a whole craft fair at the high school with the Special Olympics. I just feel like we need to hear her name more. I certainly am friends with her, and I appreciate everything she does, and she's always there at the end of the phone when I call. So I thank all of you, and a special thanks to Kristen.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Carpenter.
Just one thing. I know the Tuttle Post, I've got a lot of questions about it. I don't know if the manager has any updates that she can provide as to next steps for them and whatnot.
I'm sorry, through the board, I don't have next steps on what they're doing, their organization is doing. My understanding is we actually met with the fire chief on it the other day just to see what was happening. I still think they're waiting to find out from the insurance company, which will probably take several weeks, as to what's covered, what's the next step. Is it a rebuild? Is it a renovation? I don't have any information on it.
Thank you.
I should say, I did meet with someone from the Elks the other day, and they informed me that they have reached out and are working with the Tuttle Post to try to help them with any of their events or meeting space or anything else that they might have had there, that they've opened the door to work with them.
That's great.
So I think that will be a good support system for them.
Great. Mr. Berthew.
I did, I think there was an announcement on the Auburn fire site that there's a going to be a fundraiser. I think it's a motorcycle ride. So, certainly get on social media and look at all the local organizations, because I think that a lot of people are already starting to plan fundraisers. So, definitely take a look around and see what you can participate in. Thank you.
Well, I know the American Legion began a long time ago with the second floor of the original firehouse at Drury Square, and then they had their building on Southbridge Street for the longest time. Now we've over at Bancroft Street. So I've seen the other groups in town support one another over the course of the years, and I don't see a change in this either. I think you're going to see a lot of people step up and pitch in and help out where they can. So we'll have more information on that, I'm sure, as time goes on, but thank you for the comments. And being nothing else, have you got anything else? Okay, being nothing else, I'll ask for a
motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. No opposed. Thank you.